Okay, so we were talking about, it's 285, I believe this is the second page, documents the layout of the basement, correct?
Yes,
And you put an X at the point of entry, correct?
yes,
Okay. Now, you talked about assessments of the entirety of the basement, correct?
yes,
And ultimately leading you to the area of most damage, right?
yes.
And where was that specifically?
That was the storage closet area.
Could you put a box around that? And as far as the collapse of the floor that we saw earlier and where it was pointing to, ultimately, was that same area?
Yes.
Can we just preserve that?
S285.1.
Thank you. Sir, is there a door that's noted in the area of that storage closet, just below it?
Yes.
Sorry to do it. Can I have slide 40 of S1E?
We just hit undo.
I think it's open. Okay. Joe, you can undo that. Bottom right corner.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. What are we looking at in slide 40 of S1E?
So this is the hallway area. Now, this is actually facing, if you're looking at the direction leading outside of the structure. So you're looking at the direction towards that miscellaneous room. But this is that hallway area. Directly above, you can see the floor collapse, pointing down towards the storage closet area. But this is a door that's separated, or basically enclosed or divided that hallway area.
Okay. So if we're looking at that door, ultimately, we're looking at the B side of the residence?
Yes, you're looking at and you're gonna walk towards the B side of the residence, yes.
So generally facing
That-
east?
East towards the miscellaneous room, yes.
Now, the storage closet that you've discussed with the most amount of damage, is that in that photograph at all?
It's to the left, you can actually see the doorway, beginning doorway area to the left of that picture.
And on where we see the floor collapse in the photo, specifically, looking at, is this a wall here?
There is a wall there, yes.
Okay. And is it intact? Is it damaged? What's the status of that?
That wall is damaged, it's not intact anymore, it's crumbling.
Could I have slide 44, please? And what are we looking at there, sir?
So this would be the entrance into that storage closet. So this is basically you're stepping to the right, actually, I'm sorry, to the left of where you were just standing for that photograph. So now you're actually at the entrance into that storage closet area.
So that door would be if we're looking at that photo, it would be to the right outside the photo.
That door that we just saw, yes, it would be to the right of this photo.
Now, on the upper left portion of the photograph, sort of in the middle, what do we see back there, that gray area?
That's a concrete wall.
Okay, now, that concrete wall correlates to what of the residence?
That would be the front of the residence. That would be the A side of the structure.
Okay, the A side of the structure. Now, do you also, at times, label the sides of the closet itself during the course of your investigation?
Yes.
Okay, and how would you refer to those?
So that concrete wall would be the A side. That wall, or what remains of that wall, just the studs of that wall directly straight ahead of that picture, that would be the B side. The wall where the door that we just saw, the hallway, and that partially collapsed wall to the right of this picture, that would be the C side. And the wall that's closest to this doorway that shares the opening to this doorway would be the D side.
Okay, so as we're looking at photo in slide 44, we're looking through the D side, is that accurate?
You're looking through the D side, and the center of that photograph would be the A-B corner.
Now, we talked about most damage. Did you at any point in time look for observations of low burn?
Yes, the investigators that took part in this investigation, this is, at that point in time, that would be when they would start digging, and that's when we start looking for low burn.
So what we see in slide 44, has that been dug out yet or no?
No, just like, again, crime scene investigation, you photograph things as they were upon your arrival, and this is prior to any digging.
So this photograph, slide 44, is documenting the storage closet as you first found it?
Yes.
I want to just show you slide 74. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What does that show?
So you are in the hallway now, and you are looking through what would be the seawall of that closet, looking into the storage closet. So you're looking through the actual degraded, decomposed wall there into the closet.
In slide 75? Is that a similar view of that storage closet?
Yes.
And at the top of the photo, what do we see?
That is the floor collapse upstairs. That's part of the beams coming down.
Okay. And then can I have slide 76, please? What does this depict?
Same thing, so you're looking at that seawall, and you're also looking at the floor collapse as well.
And again, were these photos taken prior to any efforts to kind of excavate the area?
Yes.
Now, ultimately, were efforts undertaken to remove debris within that closet?
Yes, members of the Monmouth County Fire Marshals, ATF, all took part in that.
Okay, were you present for that?
Yes.
Okay. And ultimately, was anything located within that debris?
Within the debris, there was I believe, a broken bottle of alcohol, in addition to some other items.
Again, I just want to show slide 44 quickly. That's the photo we were looking at before, correct?
Yes,
With the debris in the closet.
yes.
Okay, slide 45. What does that depict?
Right in the center of that photograph is that broken bottle of alcohol that I mentioned.
Is that ultimately secured?
Yes,
Slide 46. What's that?
that is the broken bottle of alcohol.
And then slide 47. What is that?
Same thing, broken bottle of alcohol.
Now, was there any other alcohol located nearby in the basement or within the basement?
Yes, and I believe it was outside of that hallway foyer area, outside of the storage closet itself, there was another broken bottle of alcohol.
Okay. Can I have slide 48? Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what does that show?
That is a refrigerator of sort, or shelving unit for wine and alcohol.
Can I just have slide 54, please? You recognize that?
Yes.
And what does that show?
That is a shelving type of unit, and at the base of that on the floor is a broken bottle of alcohol.
That's not the storage closet, correct?
This is outside of the storage closet.
Getting back to the closet, can I have slide 56, please? Sir, what are we looking at there?
So as I mentioned, members of the investigative team eventually cleaned out the closet and removed the debris to look at, or for potential patterns on the floors and on the lower portions of the walls within that storage closet. And this is one of the photos of entering that closet.
Okay. Slide 57, please. What do we see here?
Again, this is just an overall of the floor area of that closet, showing any type of patterns that were visible.
Slide 59, please. What do we see in that photograph?
This is just another depiction of that closet. We're looking at the B wall. A wall would be to your left, C wall would be to your right. So whatever remnants of that B wall and that little shelving area at the base of there, within that storage closet.
Slide 64, please. Can you tell us what this slide depicts?
This is a depiction of two photographs. The one to the left would be the storage closet prior to the debris removal. The one to the right would be the storage closet area, same general location with the debris removed.
Once the closet is, the debris is removed from the closet, what, can you describe the observations that you're able to make with other members of the investigative team?
Yes, so as you can see the floor, you'll have some areas that you can actually see visible wood that's not very damaged. And then you also have areas of that floor that you have some damage and some burn on that floor area. So we take this into consideration. This is what I'm generally indicating as like low type burning. However, there could be various reasons for this. There could be drop down from the ceiling above and that fire just burning in that specific location, not necessarily indicating that there's an accelerant or something out of the ordinary. But this is something that we have to document. Areas that you see no burning on the floor, we can actually see the wood. We call those protected areas. Again, not uncommon to have areas that are protected from fire and heat. So we generally document that as well. In addition to more of the wall that's present and now exposed with the debris removed, looking at the walls and the actual studs that remain there, once again, we don't see this type of pattern anywhere else in the residence other than this closet area where you see that heavy type of charring and those indications of actual flame impingement, what we call pyrolysis, which is decomposition of organic material, decomposition of the wood that would generate fumes and things of that nature, which would basically fuel the fire. So we see this in great detail in this closet. And I say we, again, as a team, investigating this area.
Can I have slide 68? What are we looking at here, sir?
This would be, again, inside the storage closet area. This is a split, two photos here. The one to the left would be what you're looking straight ahead, that concrete wall, that would be the A side of the structure, the A side of the closet, the front. To the left of that would be the D side, which would be the west side of that wall. So you're looking at the remnants of what's there prior to a detailed removal of that debris. The photograph to the right is in the same general location, however, it's more focused in that AD corner. And now you can actually see a clearer picture of the floor area, specifically that AD corner in that closet. And to the right, where you see like a puddle that looks like that grayish type of liquid, that's water there, and that's what we consider low burn. That floor is deeply damaged in that one specific area when compared to the floor right to the left of that.
Now, when you talk about the heavily damaged portion of the flooring, can you just Put like a circle around that, just so we understand exactly what you're talking about. So that is circled, and it's in comparison to an area that appears to be protected?
Right to the left of that.
Preserve that,
Slide 68.1.
Can undo that. Now, can I have slide 72? Sir, what do we see here?
Again, this is just that same general location. This is more of like a mid-range type of photograph where you'll see the A wall, that concrete wall. You'll see part of the B wall, which is that wooden shelving unit to the top of the photograph. And then you'll see very little of the D wall to the bottom left of that photograph.
Now, ultimately, as part of the investigation, does anyone take samples from the area of the closet?
Yes, fire marshals and ATF, secured samples, a sample of the area in question that showed a lot of the damage, and also a controlled sample away from the damaged area.
What, if anything, ultimately was done with those samples, if you recall?
Those samples were turned over to Jesse Lamp of the ATF, one of the special agents that was present, for submission to their laboratory.
Can I have slide 60, please? 60, sorry. What are we looking at here?
This is just a photograph indicating the sample being secured.
Slide 62, please. What's that show?
Same thing, photograph of the other sample, controlled sample being secured away from the burned area.
Finally, 63, please. 63. What's that?
This is another sample that was also secured.
And ultimately, they were tested by the ATF?
Yes.
In fact, they were negative for the presence of accelerants. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Now, when we talk about the scientific method, and we talk about your observations from the storage closet, what, if anything, are you doing with the observations you made after digging out and looking at areas of low burn and fire patterns? What are you doing now scientifically?
Scientifically, we utilize what we call inductive and deductive reasoning, part of the scientific method, where you're utilizing basically any type of empirical data that you would gather in terms of the scene processing, photographs, samples like this, just basic observations, witness statements, things of that nature. And you are formulating potential hypotheses of what may have occurred. It's part of the reconstruction of crime scene investigation and fire investigation as a whole. So that inductive and deductive reasoning takes place at this point at the scene and also outside of the scene, where we're incorporating other information. Information, for example, that I've gathered through Detective Rayner from interviews that were taking place while this was actually going on simultaneously. So all of that is taken part, and we are generating potential theories, hypotheses of what may have occurred.
Was there hypotheses that were generated by yourself and other members of the team within that storage closet?
Yes, we, as a team, concluded that the area of origin, and we say area, not actual point of origin, because it's very difficult in a scene of this magnitude and of this much damage, to generate and pinpoint an area specifically within that storage closet. However, we generated that finding that the area of origin is somewhere within that storage closet for that fire, and then that fire burned for some time, as evident through what we observed through the damage, the charring, the smoke, first responder statements, things of that nature, things that other people saw, the outside sources, which I say is important through NFPA 921. You have to incorporate that. This fire originated in that storage closet based on what we observed, and then once breached whatever structural areas within that closet, it was introduced to more oxygen. Oxygen fuels fire, fire then grew and then spread and had full engulfment and full involvement of the entire structure.
Now, does coming up with a hypothesis, analyzing your data, I mean, does it also involve, potentially ruling out other sources or other causes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, also in the basement, were there any other observations made by you and other members of the team with respect to potential power, the lack of power, or things like that?
Yes. Fire personnel actually observed, made observations, made note to me that there were wires that were cut in that storage utility room, wires that resembled communication data lines, communication wires for the residents.
Just want to show you slide 35. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
This is the, we called it like a hub of location of where the data communication lines were located in the basement in that storage utility room, just west of the actual storage closet area.
Slide 36, please. What are we looking at here?
So in the center of this picture, you see what's identified as a Verizon box. At the bottom portion of that box, you'll see a black wire there. That black wire is cut, severed.
Slide 37. What do we see there?
That's just a close-up of that wire.
Next slide 38, please. What do you see there?
That is the other portion of that wire that was located.
And slide 39, please. What do we see there?
This is the internal components of that Verizon box.
Now, do you know whether or not other investigators followed up with respect to the loss of power to that Verizon box?
They did, yes.
And is that information that would have been provided to you?
Eventually, yes.
Now, with respect to timing of that, or the actual time that may have occurred, that information, why is that important to an origin and cause investigation?
One reason in particular is the lack of energy entering the house, which was observed during the initial assessment. So without having actual energy in the house, you have to take into consideration possible incendiary area causes of the fire, things of that nature. Even so much as like smoke alarms, things like that. So we take that into consideration. Now, finding this information adds to that outside information because we use this in a form of timing of the event. How long did possible occupants have before they were notified of a fire? So any type of energy entering the house or communication, things of that nature, plays a huge role in our assessment and origin and cause.
Now, you talked about earlier, but Mr. Abraham from the ATF, who was involved with inspection of electrical devices outside, correct?
Yes.
But did he also inspect areas of electrical, access within the basement as well?
Yes, he actually provided information to us about energy entering any of the rooms of the house, which helped us rule out electrical causes of the fire. So he played a large part of doing that assessment.
Now, with respect to getting back to that, you mentioned smoke alarms and also that Verizon box, but what, if any, effect would the cutting of the Verizon line have on the smoke alarm or transmittal of fire to outside sources?
To my understanding, it would provide no communication, no indication that there was a fire in the house.
talked a little bit about fire spread within that closet, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk about, based upon your investigation and the team approach, as to, I know you mentioned it briefly, but what happened with that fire within the closet and where it ultimately would have gone?
We determined that that fire remained in a slow burning type of stage, whereas it, in essence, it didn't escape that room for some time. This is evident through the combustible materials that were in the closet, and again, in culmination to first responder observations upon their arrival, where no flame was visibly indicated or observed. So that fire remained in that closet in a compartment type of setting, where it could have remained in an incipient, we call it incipient, or early stages of the fire, where it's just consuming, absorbing oxygen. Now, once that fire breached the surrounding areas, we call it like paralysizing, where it's actually decomposing the actual structure. That structural integrity now becomes compromised, and the weight of the first floor could have collapsed down and then introduced additional oxygen. In addition to damage that we observed in that first floor foyer, that stairway where that one victim was located, that stairway going down, that first floor landing, going down that first level stairs towards the basement, that floor was also compromised, and that floor was directly above the storage closet. So that's another area of where that structure was compromised that could have introduced additional oxygen, which then caused that fire to progressively increase in rapid development.
Can I have S285 on the screen? Now, go to the first floor. We're looking at the first floor, correct?
Yes.
Okay, when you talked about, if you could use that stylus just to indicate within that diagram where we're seeing that floor collapse on that first floor area.
It would be in this general location, right there.
That is in the area of the stairs down to the basement?
Yes, the stairs are right to the left of that.
Okay, what is below that again, just to be clear?
That would be access or the storage closet and that whole little foyer area by the storage closet downstairs in the basement.
We just preserve that, please.
Point two. That's
85.
285.2.
I'm back at S1E. I'm going to go to slide 49, please. What are we looking at here, sir?
All right, so you're standing on the first floor landing. This is the foyer, the entrance into the house. Right behind the photographer here would be the area where the victim was located. So now you're going down the stairway towards the basement area.
Okay. Slide 50. What do we see here?
Okay, so now you're at the landing between the first floor and the basement, and you can see the compromised floor there, the heavily damaged floor. And this was one of the reasons why we couldn't access this way to enter the basement. We had to go on the B side because of the condition of this floor here.
Slide 51, please. What do we see there?
Same thing, the compromised floor here.
Now, was there something discovered in the area of that stairway down to the basement?
Yes, there was a piece of plastic. At first indication, we didn't know what it was. Further evaluation outside of the scene determined it was one of those automatic vacuums.
Okay, can I have slide 52? Do you recognize that?
Yes,
What's that show?
that's that piece of plastic that ended up being one of those mechanical vacuums.
Slide 53. Got a picture of the vacuum.
Yes,
And was that also sent out for testing by the ATF?
I believe it was.
Now, when the storage closet was compromised, based upon your hypothesis, fire growth would have gone in what direction?
Up and out.
Okay. And up and out would have been, where would that present itself in this house?
That would present itself right in the first floor foyer area. If it compromised the stairway floor, which it obviously did, and obviously compromised the floor above the storage closet, which would have been in that living room, bathroom area on that first floor.
And as part of the scientific method, I think we briefly touched on it, but are there certain other causes, specifically, we talked about electrical, are there other causes that you need to rule out as part of testing the hypothesis?
Yes,
Does that include natural causes?
yes.
And what are natural causes?
You would consider wind, lightning, things of that nature.
And how do you go about ruling out natural causes like those?
We obtain weather reports, data reports, wind direction, things of that nature.
And was there any indication that this fire could have resulted from natural causes?
Yeah.
What about accidental? What's an accidental cause?
Accidental cause could be careless smoking, discarding cigarettes, candle, getting knocked over, things of that nature.
Now, as far as those causes go, were you able to rule out, based upon the systematic investigation, those other causes?
Yes, we actually look for things of that may cause accidents, such as candles, cigarettes, things like that, and nothing appeared in that area of origin that would have indicated that.
Within the storage closet?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned before Mr. Abraham and his determination that, I believe you said, no electrical was present at the time the fire began. Is that accurate?
Yes,
He can talk about that more specifically, but is that information that was provided to you?
yes,
Okay, is that important to the investigation of the origin and cause?
yes.
About spontaneous combustion, is that something that you would analyze at some point during the systematic investigation?
Yes, it's something that we take into consideration, yes.
Was there any evidence with respect to spontaneous combustion of any type of materials?
No,
Now, you talked a little bit about the alcohol bottle before, correct?
yes.
And that's considered, the alcohol bottle is considered potentially what in fire investigation?
That could be a source of flammable liquid used to ignite a fire.
Now, flammable liquids, is that something that you look as part of your investigation, your hypotheses, to potentially determine whether or not that could play a role in how this fire was set?
Yes.
Okay. And can you talk about what, if anything, what role that played in this investigation?
Sure. That takes large in part to our cleaning the floor area and looking for the area of lowest burn. So one of the other things that we're looking for, like I mentioned earlier, are patterns on the floor, not necessarily so much on the walls itself, but the floor. And when you have areas of low burn on the floor, areas that show a significant damage to the floor area in and around the area of origin, you have to take that into consideration of potential flammable liquids being utilized there. So we kind of take that into consideration with our hypotheses, and that's one of the reasons why we take samples of the floor like we did here.
Okay, so efforts were made to try to identify whether or not you could identify the presence of flammable liquids.
Correct.
And I think you said the testing before was positive or negative?
Negative.
Okay. Now, how does that play a role in your hypothesis regarding origin and/or cause of this fire?
It comes into a point with regard to final determination. We cannot rule it out. And I say that because of the mere presence of this broken bottle of alcohol in the storage closet, in addition to another broken bottle of alcohol outside of the storage closet, which seemed to be out of place. So at that point, it's not uncommon for any type of ignitables to actually be totally consumed in the fire without knowing the degree, the temperature that was actually in that room, and the extent of how long that fire was burning. It does not surprise me that any type of flammable ignitables, liquids, things of that nature are totally consumed. So I cannot technically rule it out. The team cannot technically rule it out as aiding to the cause of the fire.
Now, given the inability to rule out other causes and based upon guidance from the NFPA 921, were you able to determine an ignition source?
An ignition source, not a specific ignition source, no.
With respect to, did you consider the idea of an open flame?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the consideration in that regard?
With guidance from NFPA 921 at the time, without being able to rule out ignitables, you can, and it's allowed based on the guidance to infer that open flame contact was the primary source of ignition for this fire.
And that's given that it's not accidental, it's not electrical, it's not spontaneous combustion and things like that?
Yes.
Now, we talked about it before, but as far as the hypothesis that ultimately you tested with respect to the origin of the fire, that was what?
I'm sorry?
The origin of the fire, the ultimate hypothesis, I think you've said it already, but the hypothesis with respect to the origin of the fire at 15 Willowbrook.
We concurred as a team that the origin of the fire was within that storage room, that storage closet in the basement, breached the surrounding structure that caused additional oxygen to become a component of that fire and actually fuel that fire and actually allow that fire to grow beyond that storage closet and consume the rest of the house.
Once the closet, and I know you talked about where it went, but once the closet is actually gets to the point of some sort of structural breach, what happens, what else comes into the closet that assists with fire growth?
Yes, fire growth basically takes place with oxygen, fuel, which are combustibles, heat, which is basically heat that is used to basically raise the ignition source of other surrounding fuels, and a chemical chain reaction. That's what we call now the fire tetrahedron. So once oxygen becomes diminished in a compartment-style fire, which is what we have going on in this closet, think of putting a glass over a candle. What happens to the flame of the candle? It will slowly diminish because there's no oxygen. Once you raise that glass, before the point it diminishes, that flame will actually reignite. The candle will actually glow again. So this is what actually happens in a larger scale in a compartment-style fire, where you have a fire that's taking place in a small area, oxygen is diminishing, which would make sense to the point where first responders don't actually see flame coming from that area, they see a lot of smoke. Once that structure is compromised and more oxygen is being introduced to that area, think of that glass being raised over the candle, that flame is going to reignite again. So you have that issue going on potentially in this storage closet, which would basically define as to what actually occurred in this actual structure.
Now, with respect to your final hypothesis regarding the origin and also the cause, did you draw any conclusions regarding the timing?
Yes.
Okay, what were those?
Based on outside information received throughout the investigation, it was learned that the actual structure had communications and in the sense of data communications or any type of communications taking place ceasing around that 3 a.m. mark timeframe. So coupled with the fact that we see what we have a small compartment style room that's ignited, we deem that area to be the area of origin. We see the damage in that area, we see the collapse of the structure, the paralysis, the decomposition of the floor, the ceiling, all collapsing in that area in conjunction with other types of patterns. We are determining as a team, or we determined as a team, that that fire took place in the early hours of that day on the 20th. Remained in that compartment for some time before that compartment actually decayed and submitted and allowed more oxygen to be introduced and have that fire grow out.
And ultimately, based upon what you learned early on, we know what time the call came in, correct?
Yes.
And based on your investigation, I think you said we would have had no transmission earlier of any evidence of smoke or fire.
Correct.
And is that part of non-fire evidence that's important to an investigation?
Yes.
Okay. And would video potentially obtained from the scene, would that potentially be helpful in timing and origin and cause determination?
Absolutely.
And was there a video that was, you were advised about that established some timing with respect to the idea of the fire starting much earlier than reported?
Yes.
Okay, and do you recall approximately the time frame of that video of someone potentially on the property?
Yes, it was around 3 a.m.
Is that consistent with information obtained through Verizon regarding the timing of power loss?
Yes.
Now, based upon the investigation, did you ultimately culminate with 7 steps of systematic fire investigation in this case?
Yes.
And did that utilize expertise of both yourself and others that were with you during the entirety of the investigation?
Yes, this was absolutely a team approach.
Were the collective opinions of everyone involved utilized in coming up with the area of origin?
Yes.
And how about the cause?
Same.
And ultimately, did these collective opinions, collective experience, did it lead to determining the actual cause of the fire?
Actual cause of the fire we determined to be incendiary.
What is incendiary?
Incendiary means there is flame introduction, ignitable fire in an area where there shouldn't be, or in a manner where there shouldn't actually take place. So it's basically purposely set.
And regarding the 921 guidance and the scientific method, the final hypothesis ultimately was what with respect to this fire?
That there was an incendiary fire in that storage closet.